Welcome. My name is Thomas Schuttenhelm, and I'm the Artistic Director at Network for New Music. Today, we are discussing our upcoming performance of A Murmur in the Trees for 24 double bassists, performed at the Haverford Nature Trail on Sunday, April 21st at 2 p.m. And today, we have gathered together a group of individuals whose experience both with the piece and with the place will serve as an introduction to the experience that we will all have together on that Sunday, April 21st at 2 p.m. Speaking of introductions, let's see who our panelists are today. First, we have Eve Beglarian, composer of A Murmur in the Trees. Eve, great to have you.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here. Yeah.
Excellent. And we also have our ensemble leader and bassist, Christie Echols. Hi, Christie.
Hi, good to be here.
Thanks. Also, in another important role as a bassist and our connection to Haverford College is Nancy Merriam. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Thomas. Great to be here also.
Thank you. And because space and location is so important and essential to this piece, we have a representative from the Haverford Arboretum, Jennie Kelly. Hi, Jennie.
Hi, everyone. Looking forward to hosting you.
Excellent. So let's start with Eve. Please bring us back to your concept and starting to put together the idea for this piece, A Murmur in the Trees. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Yes, the project actually began on the eve of COVID, and it was going to be a project that was going to happen at Governor's Island, and the collaborators were a visual artist by the name of Eve Beglarian and Robert Black and myself. And because of COVID, Governor's Island was completely shut down. It was not clear to us how we were going to work together. And so eventually, it was Robert who said, there should be 24 basses in a grove of trees. It was Robert's idea. And I said, that's a really beautiful idea. Just the thought of what that might sound like. And so I thought on it for a while. And I was up in Vermont during COVID, so I was hiking in the woods regularly.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine gave me a piece of birch bark, that he had found on a hike, when we were hiking together. And I looked at it, and it was so clearly reminiscent of what the piano roll notation looks like in a sequencer program. The lines were so clear, and everything about it was just. And so I decided that the score for the 24 basses should be an interpretation of this particular piece of birch bark. And the birch bark was about 10 inches long.
Mm-hmm.
And plants, we're told, communicate by means of signals that travel at 1/3 of an inch per minute, which means that this 10-inch piece of birch bark was a 30-minute piece, right? And
Yeah.
so that tells you about this axis back and forth, the horizontal axis. The vertical axis, I decided to be that I would impose a grid and have it be the overtone series of the 4 strings of the bass, because that is, of course, a natural phenomenon as well. And so I wrote a score that mapped this birch bark into a score, both in terms of time and in terms of pitch. And then we figured out a way to make different paths through this complex, right? Because sometimes the lines are on top of each other, that would be at various levels of difficulty.
Yeah.
So there are parts that can be played by a 10-year-old who has been playing the bass for, 6 months. And then there are parts that require you to be able to grab an overtone, high on the fingerboard. And so that became the piece. And the title comes from a poem by Emily Dickinson that talks of a murmur in the trees. And in a way, I think it really characterizes the experience. When you first hear about it, you think, oh, basses, they're big, and that, the drop in EDM and bass is loud. But this is very delicate. And there are ways, Robert would say, that you want to perform, the basses are performing the piece for the trees. And the audience is free to move through the path and experience the piece, and in a way they become a co-performer of the piece. But really the bass players are listening to the trees and interacting with the trees. And of course the bass is a tree in a new shape. So
indeed, it's a really fascinating concept, and I'd like to explore a couple of those components, because you mentioned that the birch bark itself is, the piece of nature, suggesting parameters of the piece. And I also wanted to mention someone who couldn't be with us here today, who was so integral to this, and that's Robert Black, the eminent bass player Robert Black, who passed away in June of 2023. And I know there's two people who are really connected to Robert, so I'd like to bring Christie and Nancy into the discussion briefly about Robert. Nancy, you knew Robert quite early, right? You were classmates together. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
My connection to Robert is that we went to school together at Hart School of Music for our studies with Gary Carr. And Robert and I performed concerts as a double bass duo for children, for the elderly, and that he also performed on my senior recital. And it was really fun doing these concerts together, and I really cherish these memories. Years back, I attended a concert that Robert was playing of Eve's music, and I was really intrigued with the music. It was just absolutely beautiful, and loved being there. So when I got the opportunity last year to perform A Murmur in the Trees at the Arboretum, and Robert was there, I just jumped on it, and it was just magical. Having the 24 basses there and all the trees and stuff. And unfortunately, it was the last time I saw Robert, but I'm just so happy that I have that memory of us together. And that this year's tribute to be at Haverford College, where I run the concert series, is so fantastic, in connection with the Arboretum. And the nature trail is just absolutely gorgeous. But if it rains, we have this brand new recital hall with all these different levels, and it's going to be really amazing there too. So it's a win-win. But I sure hope it happens on the nature trail, and I hope many people can experience this with us.
Thank you for sharing that, Nancy. It was nice. This is truly a historic performance for Network, because Network for New Music has never remounted a performance like we've done, but because it was such a success last year, in having everyone there, and a truly special moment. I saw when you and Robert met each other, it was a real reunion, Nancy, and it was very special. He's such a kind spirit that's always present. And Christie, you have more recent experience both with Robert and with the piece. So please tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I began studying with Robert in 2018 for my master's at the Hart School. And I was his graduate student, and we worked on lots of different things together. But I remember that one day he came into studio class, and I think this was right before everything had happened. And he was like, "Hey, we're going to be doing this thing, and there's going to be trees, and there's going to be basses. Like, would you want to do this? It sounds like something you'd be into." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, sign me up. Let's do this." Which, has then led to meeting Eve and getting closer to you, Thomas. And also, I was thinking about it. So I have performed this piece five different times, and with 24 different bass players. That's over 100 bass players that I've been able to be in contact with and meet, just through this work. So for me, what's really special about this is that not only we're doing something that's really unheard of. Like it's very hard to get 24 double bass players all together in a room and playing the same thing. So for me, it's this opportunity to bond over the fact that we play this giant, beautiful instrument and to bond over how beautiful it is. And, Eve touched a little bit on this earlier, but Robert was very into the spiritual aspect of this piece. And every single time I perform this work, I think of him and I think of his words of giving back to the trees and giving back to what we have to be able to perform this music.
Yeah, and Jennie, I want to bring you in now because as Eve mentioned, as much as the bassist and the piece occurs in the trees and we're experiencing it there, we're also playing for nature and from nature. So Jennie, please give us some insight into the space and what we'll be experiencing in the Haverford Nature Trail.
Sure. So Haverford College Arboretum is a 216-acre campus, and the entirety of our campus is considered an arboretum. And what that means for those that may be unfamiliar with the term is it is a living museum, a curated collection of trees. Oftentimes, if I'm giving tours to small children, I'll say it's a zoo, but it's for the trees. So we care for the trees are labeled, they're accessioned in our database, and we have over 10,000 accessioned trees on campus that you can come and learn more about, whether that's for the home garden or for a more professional setting. The performance itself is going to be taking place on our nature trail, and the nature trail is a 2.2-mile loop that surrounds the perimeter of campus. And the timing of the year is very special because not only is it our Earth Week, it's very close to Arbor Day, it's really a celebration of spring and of our campus coming to life. And so if you're here to witness the piece, you're going to be seeing a lot of spring flowering trees. Our redbud collection, Cercis canadensis, should be in bloom, as well as some varieties of our cherries. Crab apples will be blooming on campus, the dogwoods. So hopefully it should just be a really special time with a lot of trees showing off and doing their spring bloom for the season.
Yeah, we're incredibly grateful to be there and thank both you and Nancy for being such wonderful hosts for this special performance. Eve, I'd like to come back to you because you were describing how the birch bark formed a score and then the harmonic series from the lines, but how you convey that as a score. Tell us a little bit more about how those bass players know what to play.
Thank you. Yes, yes. When you're in a marching band, that you get a little marching lyre that you get to attach to your instrument, and you can march around in formation and do all sorts of fancy things quite easily while looking at written music. But bass players, that really hasn't been set up for bass players, And so it really felt like it would be so intrusive to have music stands, and how would we coordinate, and how would people count and click, it just seemed like not a good idea. And so what we did was we made guide tracks, which are, you download it to your phone, and then everybody presses play on the guide track, and it tells you what note to play and where, because some of the overtone series, there are different ways to play the same note on different strings, but they're slightly different in sonority and sometimes pitch as well. And so we want the very specific overtone. And so it's Robert's voice telling you in words what note to play. And then you hear Robert playing that note so that it helps you align. And that way the start and stop is clear and everything's totally clear. And as long as everybody presses play at roughly the same time, this is nature, we're flexible here. The whole thing unfolds together, and that's how it's done.
Yeah, it's truly a brilliant concept. So I'd like to bring on our two resident bass players to speak more of that. Christie, tell us a little bit about the techniques involved in putting together a piece like this. And we know, of course, that Eve, you'll be with us on the 21st, helping with the choreography and bringing together where the bassists are placed. But Christie, tell us a little bit more about the techniques involved and how that impacts a performer.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of just what we're playing on the bass, one of the reasons I really love this piece is that it features the whole overtone series. So we're not actually pressing down a note, we're using harmonics. So we're just kind of lightly pressing on it. So the first kind of hurdle is that you have to be able to play these harmonics, which, you know, depending on what part you have, depends on how far up on the bass you are. Sometimes you're in the stratosphere. So that's kind of that first hurdle. But the next one I would say is being able to start together. So we have kind of developed this cute little system where we're all in a line and looking at each other, and we have our section leaders, and each section leader kind of holds up their bow almost like a flag. And then as soon as we put the bow down, that's when everybody presses play on their guide track. So that also is one of the kind of techniques or hurdles that we have to get along. But I think again that just speaks to this idea of like we're doing much more than just getting together and playing a piece. We're communicating with each other in a way that's much different than traditional chamber music, because we have to communicate through sight and through feeling and looking at each other and going, okay, are you playing now? Where's your guide track? Are we at the spot where we all need to be quiet, you know? So that's kind of that to me is just another really interesting kind of element and technique of it. It's different than just, oh, I got to get all the notes right, you know?
Thank you, Christie. That's really good insight. Nancy, tell us a little bit more in terms of how you prepare as a player. And because what Christie was saying is so much of this is about communication, both communicating with the ensemble and communicating with nature. Put us into the mindset of a bassist playing this piece, even if it's recapturing what you experienced last year.
That's an interesting question, Thomas, and I think that Christie would be better to answer this. I had a funny reaction to my recording last year, so I had to do a little bit of improvisation. And so, you know, technology can really provide fun challenges with you. So while I was rehearsing the piece, my phone that had the recording on it was in my pocket, and it jumped to a preschool song of Splish Splash. I was taking a bath. So I'm in this beautiful Arboretum, and I'm going splish splash. Oh no. So I think anything like that can happen. But the music itself, what's beautiful is that Robert's voice is in your ear. He's so calm as he's walking you through where to play it. And, you know, it'll be a calmer experience this year, I know, and really
Well,
personal because it's at Haverford.
certainly no one would have noticed that from the outside, because I remember watching you and you seemed so intense into the piece. And I remember people walking up to you and walking around you and listening to you and then moving on to the next bass player. So you're
And
such a
Thomas, yeah, this year I also work at a preschool, so I work with children ages 3 to 5, and so I've put out an announcement for them and their families to come and hear it, because you know 3-year-old can't get to a concert by by the he or herself. So anyway, it'd be nice to have all the different people that are coming to explore this. It's just going to be glorious as we're in our own little worlds with the trees and we're communicating with our fellow bass players. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and Jennie, there are already so many wonderful sounds in the Arboretum, in the nature trail, and then we're going to be making additional sounds. It's going to be sort of what I think is kind of a glorious polyphony happening on the 21st. So just give us sort of just a setup of the resonance of the trail itself. Because when I was walking on it, I felt like even the crunch of the trail contributes to it. And the birds and where we look directs us to different sounds, almost like a left speaker, right speaker. We're going to be in a beautiful surround sound environment. Tell us more about that, Jennie.
So the trail itself is situated, as I said, around the whole entirety of campus. But the piece that we will be focusing on runs right along a small corridor where there's a stream that flows from our duck pond all the way down through and then past and out of campus. But I do think the elements of having a water source nearby are also going to add a lot of sound and features. So you'll hear stream babbling, but as Thomas mentioned, there's leaves on the trail, there's gravel, there's a lot of different things underfoot. So as people are walking through, there will be sounds of nature that way, as well as our resident fauna that we have. So we have a decent amount of wildlife on campus. They tend to avoid highly populated areas, but especially our birds, you're going to be able to hear those in the nature trail. And spring's really a great time just because the leaves are starting to come in, but they're not dampening the sound fully. So you can definitely experience a wide amount of sounds that are going to be created both with the musical instruments, but also just with nature itself. And it being Earth Week and a time of reflection, I'm hoping that people are going to take some time to kind of meditate on those sounds too, and just appreciate the season that is spring.
Yeah, Jennie, thank you for reminding us of that. You know, very much like we are in nature, we're in an artwork. We see things in the foreground, middle ground, and background, and we're going to hear things all around us. It's just going to be a special, special performance. Any concluding thoughts from our panelists before I recap for our audience where to get our tickets and how to join us for this performance?
I have one actually. I feel like Nancy and Jennie both just touched on this and the fact that this is meditative. Um, the entire process, you're going, you're like, okay, I'm starting, it's go time. And then I feel like as soon as it starts, I have one earbud out, I'm listening to everybody around us. I'm so excited to hear this stream now that you've told me about this. This is going to be fantastic. But truly, it's not meditative just for the players, it's meditative for the audience. So I really just want to encourage everyone to put aside everything for a couple hours, come check this out, experience this meditation, let go of everything, and really just immerse yourself in the moment. This piece is perfect for that.
Thanks for that reminder and recap. Yes, Jennie, please.
And also in reference with immersing yourself in nature, we will be offering Arboretum tours prior to the performance. So if you're in the area early and you want to go on a half-hour guided tour, I'll be leading around 4 different groups. They'll be half-hour long each, so starting at 12 and then ending at 2 o'clock right before the performance. But we would be more than happy to have you along, and you can come into our campus, learn a little bit more about our tree collection and also our history.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to invite everyone to the Haverford Nature Trail on the campus of Haverford College on Sunday, April 21st. The performance of A Murmur in the Trees begins at 2 p.m., but we're going to have special tree tours prior to that beginning at noon. I hope you can all join us for this special performance. More information can be seen on the website of Network for New Music. Thank you all for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you all on the 21st.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christie.
Thank you.
Thank you.